deal about this film. That usually seems to be more my role than, why can't anybody see what a great movie this is? I'm not sure if I've really ever encountered that particular scenario.
I actually had that situation years ago. There was a small independent film called Everything Moves Alone, and I was I think the only critic who actually gave it a decent review. And I showed it to somebody who was a distributor who was trying to get the film to a wider release. And the guy watched it, came back to me and said, "What do you see in this thing?" And he was genuinely sincere about this. He's like, I saw something there that he didn't see and most other people didn't see as well. But that's the beauty of criticism, is the fact that this is not a be-all, end-all. We're not making statements of fact. We're basically expressing opinion. And a lot of filmmakers and other creative artists that I know, they get very upset when they get bad reviews. And I've said to people who have objected to some of my negative writing, I said, look, this is strictly my opinion. You could take it or you can leave it. But this is how I am interpreting what I'm seeing. And I think many people are under the impression, the critics know everything, and nothing could be further from the truth, because they're not stating a fact. They're just stating what they feel has value and what doesn't have value.
Exactly, yeah.
How did you become a critic? What inspired you to go that route?
Well, I went to school at University of Michigan, and U of M is much more of a film theory type of school than a filmmaking type of school. I don't know if they still are that way, but that was definitely how I felt at the time. And we learned a lot of Christian Metz, and I took a feminist film theory class. So I was much more into the theory, and really enjoyed kind of pulling films apart, writing papers, and trying to sink my teeth into the subtext, as it were. And then once I got out of school, I didn't have any more papers to write, and I kind of missed it. I really had enjoyed that. So I thought about writing for other people, writing for publications, and the idea of doing that, having deadlines, those kind of things, really didn't necessarily turn me on. So through a whole series of circumstances, I actually decided to start up a zine. I was really a fan of zine culture, and kind of never looked back from that. It was 94, and I started Cashiers du Cinemart, so I had a venue for my writing and was able to just kind of write what I wanted to write. So I always enjoyed, looking for those films. Again, the films that I would think that people should see that maybe they hadn't seen or hadn't necessarily given a chance, and thought about thought about myself in Ann Arbor or Detroit and not necessarily knowing about certain genres or certain films. And then when I would get a zine and see reviews of movies and write-ups of movies, and I would say, that's really fantastic. And I would try to look for those type of films through my own channels and try to spread the word about those. So that's really kind of how I got into the criticism, and I always tried to look at things through, again, taking apart the subtext, and if I could find something more interesting than just telling the story, this happened, this happened, this happened, and actually talk about the themes of the film and what it's similar to and what it might have been influenced by and how it might have influenced other films or even other works of art.
Well, at the risk of sounding like a cliche, have you seen any good films lately?
Well, I'm trying to think of the last good one that I saw. I mean, I see a lot of great stuff for the podcast, so and a lot of varied things. I mean, tonight we're about to record an episode about a film called The First Nudie Musical, which came out, I want to say, 75, 76, and unfortunately, it kind of got buried by Paramount when it came out because one of its stars was Cindy Williams, who was very hot at the time in Laverne and Shirley, and the studio was embarrassed that their star, their squeaky clean star, was in this dirty movie, which actually was very far from dirty. It's a very, very fun film, And yeah, there's some nudity in it, but it's really all in good fun. And a lot of it actually kind of reminds me of the film Orgasmo, the Trey Parker film, which is kind of behind the scenes of a porn set. And this kind of is along the lines, and believe it or not, there's actually more singing and dancing in First Nudie Musical than there is in a Trey Parker film, which I know is kind of unusual because he does definitely like his musicals.
You know, I'm dating myself. I was a little boy in the 70s when that came out, and I can remember Cindy Williams, I think it was on Merv Griffin's show, and she had mentioned that that film was going to be coming into release, and Merv had no idea what she was talking about, as I recall, and I think the film came and went. If it played 2 weeks, well, I'm from New York City, if it played there for 2 weeks, it was a lot, so I don't know what kind of release it got elsewhere in the country.
Yeah, it didn't get a whole lot. It seemed to play a lot of smaller markets, but then it was getting a lot of really good reviews. It got a lot of good reviews, and the filmmaker, Bruce Kimmel, was finding out about these reviews, and he finally decided to go public with the whole thing of Paramount kind of burying the film. And I think today he would have made quite a big splash and would have been kind of hailed as a hero, and this is great, this, artist taking on the studio, and would have really been hailed for that, and kind of maybe wrote his own check. But in the 70s when this happened, he was just blackballed and wasn't allowed to make a movie for another couple of years. So, and then when that happened, he ended up making The Creature Wasn't Nice, which I know a lot of people like, and there's a lot of funny bits too, but unfortunately he kind of got yanked off of that and they recut it, and he is not happy with the way that the movie was cut. So he really didn't have a whole lot of luck with the majors after that.
And the funny thing too is Cindy Williams, everyone knows her for Laverne and Shirley, but a lot of people tend to forget that she was actually a very versatile performer. She was in two of the best films of the 70s, American Graffiti and The Conversation, not playing slapstick role, and very effective performance. If she hadn't gone for Laverne and Shirley, she could have actually been a major dramatic actress.
Yeah, it's funny because I was just talking with my co-hosts about that, and she was such a force to be reckoned with, and people forget about people forget about her role in The Conversation, and unfortunately a lot of people, I think, forget about The Conversation overall. And that's one of those movies that, yes, it was nominated for an Oscar, but when people talk about films of the 70s, they definitely look at more of the Godfather films, and they tend to forget the work of art that was wedged right in between there. I mean, Godfather 2 and The Conversation were both nominated for Best Film the same year. That's pretty darn good work for Francis Ford Coppola to have two movies nominated for Best Picture.
Indeed. And also Cindy Williams was in another film, I think after Laverne and Shirley, which had the same fate as the Nudie musical. It was a little movie called Euphoria, if you remember that one. UFORIA. It was about UFO obsession.
I remember the title, and I even remember the box cover at one of the kind of cult video stores that I used to frequent.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I could go on talking all night, but unfortunately I'm limited by time. So before we let you go, where can people find you online, find the podcast, and find your writing?
You can find us over at projectionboothpodcast.com. You can find me over on Twitter at ProBoothCast, which is a really awkward Twitter handle, so I would recommend just going to projectionboothpodcast.com. And you can find my writing. I write over at my zine, I write over at my blog, which is impossiblefunky.blogspot.com, or the back issues of Cashiers are available via cashiersducinemart.com, which I know is a little bit of a mouthful, so you can always go to impossiblefunky.com, and that'll take you right there.
You're also the author of a couple of books. Are these still in print?
Oh, yeah. Well, they're print on demand, so they're always in print, forever and always. So,
Excellent.
Yes, there's Cinema Detours, and there's also Impossibly Funky Cashiers Cinema collection, which kind of gathers together some of the stuff that I consider my favorite pieces from the first, 15 issues of Cashiers to Cinemart. So we've put out a couple issues since then, and hopefully one of these days we'll put out an 18th issue, but the podcast is definitely keeping me hopping.
Excellent. I'm going to listen in for the Nudie musical. That sounds fun. Take a look also for Catch My Soul. That'll be a great episode in the future. And if you need a guest, if you're short 1 week, I'm available.
Sounds great. We've done Shakespeare months in the past, passed. So maybe it's time to dust that off and do another Shakespeare month.
Oh, God, I love the Shakespeare. Actually, I just watched Olivier's Hamlet the other day. You know, there's just one last thing. I've seen the film several times, and maybe I was either paying too much attention to the film, or it's one of those things you just look at and you don't realize. But there's the scene, one of the scenes, I think it's when we're introduced to the king and queen, and Hamlet is brooding about his father's demise. You can actually see the shadow of the boom microphone.
Huh.
And that's I'm going to go. If you're going to do Shakespeare, if you want Hamlet back, I'll take a second look, and I can tell you exactly at what point in the film you can see the microphone making a cameo appearance.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Thanks.
Not as prominent as Dolomite, I'm sure.
Okay. Oh, no. Hamlet and Dolomite, you're the first person to put those two together in one sentence. You're impossibly funky. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, sir. Have a good night.
Take care. And before I go, I just want to bring on Peter Pinho to talk about what's happening here on PPRN this coming week. Peter, hello. Thank you for doing the soundboard again. Tomorrow, I think you have the band Phoenix Tree is going to be. And there's a beautiful singer-songwriter named Canyon. That's actually her name. I saw her in Canyon, like Grand Canyon, and she is quite grand. I saw her in performance. You'll love her. She's got a great sense of humor and very, very talented. And Wednesday, you're taking your show on the road to a place called D-Man's Bar and Grill in not. Corey Brown's supposed to be there. Alison Zarsty's going to be there. The Va Va Voom girl is going to be there. I'll be there.
The mixtape show will be there. There's going to be a lot of people on hand. Come down. We're having drink specials. It is D-Man's. They have an outside patio, so it's nice and secluded. And, you can't see it from the street, so come down and hang out with us.
And we'll have nice weather, I think, too. Not have today's weather. No. And, of course, we know Jim Dynamo's on Friday, but you're back again on Sundays here on PPRN.
Sundays, all things sports. We're now on iTunes and all things sports, along with the Mother's Show, Peter Pinho Show. You can catch that on iTunes also, but all things sports just got added to it, and that's Sundays from 10 to 1.
And unless we forget Saturdays from 12 noon to whenever, you got Mixtape Saturday. If you were listening this past Saturday, there was a bit of a hiccup thanks to Comcast. Well, it wasn't just you. Think of the whole Eastern Seaboard.
The link is if you have an iPhone, you subscribe to the podcast. The link on the iPhone has a podcast app. If you subscribe to any of our shows, it'll automatically update, and you can listen to it data-free.
Excellent. And here on PPRN Radio, now that once I'm getting off the air, we're going to go back to one of the older shows that Peter has had, and he's been doing this for more than 4 years. So give a listen. I'll be back Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for listening, and see you soon.